Attention humanitarian and development professionals. Are you looking to take your career to the next level? Then you've come to the right place. Humanitarian Global offers self-paced online courses designed specifically for you. With our comprehensive curriculum, you'll build your capacity in the most critical areas of humanitarian and development work. Our course offerings include monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, water, sanitation and hygiene, disaster risk reduction and management, food security and nutrition in emergencies, procurement and supply chain management, human nutrition and dietetics, maternal, infant and young child nutrition. With Humanitarian Global, you'll have the opportunity to grow your skills and impact the lives of people in need. Visit our website to learn more about our courses and apply today.
All right, I'm sharing my screen. You could give me once it's available, you let me know kindly.
Yes, Wycliffe, we are able to see your screen. You can put in slideshow. Yes, it's okay. It's okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. So once again, I want to welcome all of us for today's meeting. And ideally, as you have already said, what we are going to look at is the issues of monitoring and evaluation, but more specifically on how we measure our results and the impact. And this is usually in terms of now how effective data analysis and visualization can help us to manage and measure our results and the impact. First of all, before I start, I want just to give a quick overview in project management, what you call a project, and then how do we evolve down until we come to issues at level of data management. And for that case, in any project, when you want to undertake any project, there's always a reason as to why you're doing that. And then project, as you plan to do it, there are always a set of objectives which are guiding you to do that project. And in so doing, you break them down to activities which build up on outputs so that you are able to, do them as interventions in a certain specific period of time with a certain specific budget and resources, which could be human resources and so on, until you are able to say you have been able to do your project. And as such, when you do a project, there are critical stages that I want us just to remind ourselves of. And in any project, when you want to do it, you have to really have the initial stage where you sit down and have the idea together. Then maybe in the NGO sector, we like saying once you do the project initiation, then you do proposal development, which leads you to now sharing your proposal to the donors. And then once the donors maybe have approved your project, then you want to start up your project and now implement it. And in the process of implementing, we have a stage of monitoring and evaluation, which is very critical at that stage of implementation. And then later you also build up through, again, other high-level evaluations, which come as a sort of, trying to see how successful your project was. That is just but a synopsis of logical stages which we have, which are very critical in the project. And then once that is done, then you phase out and then you repeat the same process again. Now, for this reason, then the question comes, where does M&E come in place? One of the things we'll ask ourselves as programmers, at what stage of those levels, which I've already mentioned, does M&E start? And when does it end? Those are very critical questions I want us to have in mind, even as we go on in this training. One of the things I have to mention here is, in this model, which I've just conceptualized all the logical stages, which I've already highlighted initially. If, for example, you are able to look at the startup level, then you look at the donor appraisal, then you look at the proposal development, and then you look at stages like implementation, evaluation, phase out, all these things. And you can see in the white box, I've put some phases which are very critical. For example, in the startups section, we'll have you to set up maybe an office, make purchases, maybe you come up with a steering committee, and then you do like maybe a baseline survey, because it's very critical to help you to know what is the start in terms of your project. Where are you starting from? What's your baseline figure looking like? So if you look at, for example, at the interventions, when you're doing implementation, we may want to do interventions whereby you'll be doing specific monitoring interventions. Maybe you are collecting data, for example. If you look at issues of evaluation, maybe you're doing a midterm evaluation. When you're doing like phase out, we are talking about preparing a final project report. All these activities, basically what I'm trying to underscore is they involve data at some point. And because of that data being involved at some of those, all these levels, therefore we need to ask ourselves then, how do you start thinking in terms of how do you manage your results? So that when you manage your results, then how do you analyze those data that you collect from the project? One of the chain of events that I keep emphasizing more, and in monitoring and evaluation, I think is another topic we'll have at another point in time for those who'll be interested in technical now knowledge on monitoring and evaluation as a whole. We have what we call the result-based management. So result-based management is a process where we have a chain of results in the M&D platform. In this case, I have tried to break this down as sort of chain of events when you're doing a project now. Any project, as I've already said, will have a goal. Those goals are broken down to objectives, and in objectives, we have activities and inputs, which now when you build them up and you start doing the interventions, you build to outputs. From outputs, you get your outcomes, and then in the long run, we expect to get impacts. So when you look at the stages of activities and output level, you have seen, I've circled that to imply this is where we focus in monitoring and evaluation. Again, in outcomes and impact, we tend to focus more on evaluations. And this tells you therefore that while I'm doing monitoring and while I'm doing evaluation, still there's issues of data, which is being involved at all those stages. And as a result of that, then I have to really ask myself, how do I present my data? How do I analyze my data? How do I collect it? All those kind of things. Then how do I disseminate it later once I've put it together as a final report? Key to note is that the results picks from the outputs, outcomes, and impact. It's very key for you to take note of that. So basically, there are a few things that I wanted us to take note of when you talk about the results. And one of the key things I'm mentioning is that, remember, it's very important to know that if you do not measure your results, and which I've said are at the stages of outputs, outcomes, or impacts, then we might not be able to tell our success. And when you talk about measuring results, it's very important to know that we are being cognizant of data. Again, if you cannot recognize your failure, you cannot correct it. And how do you measure your failure? Obviously, you must have had data to inform you that this is what made you not to do it right. Then if you can also not see success, then we are not going to learn as a program at the end of the day. And for that reason, I want just to bring this very key point. Then how do you measure our results? What are some of the key things that we've been interested when we want to measure this? One of the key things that really comes out clearly that we need to ask ourselves is, how do we then bring the issues of data management? And in terms of data management, the first process we want to look at, how do you collect your data? And that's what we call information generation. How do you capture that data? Then how do you store it and synthesize that information? Then how do you share, and how do you use that information? So it's very important for us to understand that when you talk about information, is it generated? How do we capture it? In what systems, for example? At what level do we capture it? How do we store the data? Then how do we share it out for other stakeholders or within the program? Then how is that data helping us to make decisions? That's very, very key. And now that brings us to data analysis. And I want to be very, a little bit just to define data analysis. But even before that, I want to say this, that it's very important for us to know that before you analyze your data, you must have done your data collection. One of the things you'll be able to just learn, even as you interact with Humanitarian Global, is we'll be having also other forms of how we collect data, maybe through online platforms like ODK, Couple Collect, using tools like Activity Info. All those opportunities, you still have an opportunity to learn if you want to understand more in terms of how do you collect your data using maybe the mobile applications. But today's lesson, we're not focused more on that. We want to look at now in terms of data analysis. How do we do this? And we say when we're analyzing our data, we're looking at the process of collecting, then you transform that data which you have collected, and you organize it in a form that it can draw conclusions and make some decisions through either predictions or through trends, for example. So when you talk about that process of doing all that, then we are talking about putting your data in a form which you call data analysis. And of course, I'm saying that while this is very important, take cognizance of data collection, which I've already mentioned. And you can do your data collection either through paper-based processes, or you can use maybe the digital platforms. And now, once that's been done, then you come to the level of data analysis. The key question you have to ask yourself, then why should I analyze my data? Obviously, this is because we're interested as programmers to see the trends, the relationships. What are things that are within the data lines, what you call the outliers, all variations which are existing. And through this data, what can we tell? Which story can we tell? Those are the reasons we want to analyze our data to help us make a decision and conclusions about a subject matter in a certain project. Then another thing we also want to look at is the issue of understanding that when you talk about data, in project management, learn to differentiate between two types of data. There's qualitative data, there's quantitative data. And all these have different approaches in terms of collection, and even in terms of the tools that you use to analyze, and even in terms, before you generate one whole report. And it's very important to know that any quality report will always have the two forms of data combined. That's quantitative and qualitative. Going forward, I just want to say that once you have analyzed your data, then you want to present it in a way that that data can be shown in visual representations. For instance, we have the graphs, the charts, all the maps. And this is now what you call as data visualizations. And the reason as to why we want to do our data visualization is because we want to make it easy. By the way, psychologists argue and say that anything that somebody is able to see and see a certain maybe pattern or a certain trend visually, it has a more impact for that person to understand it and even to process it better than an information that maybe you read to that person. So visualization, we can't undermine it in terms of its power to help us make decisions. And therefore, it's very important to take advantage of these platforms to visualize out so that other people who are not even technical, for example, will be able to learn through and say, oh, these are what this data means. Just imagine today, maybe you're meeting like a president of a country and you want to present to him some data about the economic status of the growth of the economy for the last maybe 6 months. It becomes more easy for them to understand maybe when you present in a graphical format, and like when you just explain in numbers, you know, that's the reason as to why we are saying that. Then visualization becomes a very important technique for us to use. And what are some of the common techniques to apply? I've given a sample here. You can use pie charts, plan charts, scatter plots, line graphs, all this, and even GIS map is a form of these techniques, anything that can visualize. So when you talk about GIS, that's the information system maps. There is a very common trend that is now coming currently in terms of data management and how we visualize our data. Another thing that we want us to ask ourselves, then what are the common tools? And this is very critical, and this is what I want to emphasize here, because very soon, as Humanitarian Global, we are launching out and starting this SPSS trainings and other trainings of which you may raise interest in. So these are some of the tools we really want to look at when you talk about data analysis and visualizations, which are able to do that. One could be Excel. Excel is a common tool which all of us have easily within our point of access. Then you have Tableau, SPSS, Stata, Power BI, ALP program, Go Charts. Those are just to mention a few. There are so many of these tools. And I remember I also mentioned that some of the data collection tools can also be used for visualization. For example, when you collect your data with a Copo Collect, at some point you may want to visualize and see what is it that I've been able to get, even though you have not analyzed it fully. So these are some of the things that I want us to really take note of, that very soon, out of these tools, we'll start having trainings. And already we have a training schedule for SPSS starting from the 2nd of next month, which I think Diana will mention more about after this training. Zoo analytics is another common trend that with a tool that is coming up in also this, and especially for business ideas and also human resources. Now, there are a few questions that I want to mention after I've done a data analysis. Then what next? How do I make use of my information? One of the things, therefore, we'd be interested is once you do data analysis and visualization, the end product is a final report that you want to present. We want to see a report. How does it look like? And therefore, I felt, even though this was not a focus of this, you may want to ask yourself, when I want to develop a final project report, how does it look like? What are the areas that I need to focus on? And that's why I felt like I need to answer these few questions on data reporting quickly before I just conclude this. And here we are saying the key question we need to ask ourselves is to focus on the areas that you are looking at. And these are the objectives. Then you need to know the outputs that you are addressing, or rather that you have been able to gain or deliver in the project. Then you also need to know who are the project beneficiaries who have been involved in that project that you did. Those are the things that you want to report on. Then what was the main benefit? This is more qualitative now. When you talk about what of the main benefit, because it may not be necessarily numerical, it may be more of like, you know, the string. So these are things that you want to explain, like, this is the benefit that we got. It's not necessarily a number. Then what strategies were used or that worked well? How was the donor partnership? And what did you do to achieve it, for instance? What are some of the outcome result areas that you have been able to reach and achieve? So those are some of the kind of questions when you think through when you're doing your data analysis. And I'm giving this because as a programmer, you just don't analyze data. There must be questions that guides you to analyze your data. And one of the key things I just want to mention is that behind end data, there are also the questions, the whys. Why the numbers? And that's very important for us to think through when we are doing end data analysis and also visualizing end data. For example, this is just a data sample that I took from somewhere where you see there are two partners, X and Y, and they have been able to achieve some family planning methods. And this is the lack uptake, long-acting contraceptives. For both X, and the second one is achievements for X, and then the third one is for achievement of Y. So these are the quarters, quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4, and then there are those numbers. If somebody gave you this table without explaining anything, without even giving the reasons as to why those numbers were attained, we can't tell. So we always want to ask ourselves, and that's why I'm saying that it's very important to know that beyond end data reporting, we need to know what is the whys behind that. Very, very critical for us to answer that. And as you do that, then you need to develop your report. Just some of the quick thoughts. And because I felt this presentation may be shared later to all of us, there are a few thoughts I had about how do a good report. It must meet the needs of the reader. It must be at the right level of the reader. It must make a logical structure. It must give a good impression. All these points have just been mentioned there. I don't want to necessarily have a look at them, but I felt that when I do this presentation, there are some of the things I want you to have back in your mind that when you do your data analysis and visualization, there are key things you need to remember that even as you aim your final report, always ensure that some of these things are taken care of. Also, the issue that you need to ask yourself, a good report must make assumptions about the reader's understanding. I already say that. Then apply the so what test. Explain why something is a good, why something, for example, overachieved or did not achieve. When you see things where you have seen numbers, they're more than they expected, you need to give a reason. We always need to question, why is this number so much than they expected, for example? Or why did you not underachieve? Issues of writing a very quality report, issues of good English, stanzas written in correct grammar and spelling, very critical. And these are some of the guidelines which I've given. I may not necessarily want to go through them because actually this was just to give you a quick thought, think through, and also ask yourself on what are some of the things you want to really understand when you're doing your data analysis and visualizations, and also looking forward that is not the end result. The end result is generating a good report, which could be interesting, people can look at and admire. But let me just give a good example here of a case study looking at the pie chart, the graph and then a pie chart. When you are developing and analyzing your data using a pie graph, you need to understand some of the few things, for instance, and I think this will discover more when you'll be doing, for example, in SPSS, when you're doing a graph, I'll tell you how do you analyze a nominal variable, variable, scale, variable, and all those things. You'll be able to discuss all of those. So it's good to understand that when you're using the nominal variable analysis, you either do a bar chart or a bar graph. If you're doing ordinal, you can also do the same, or if you're doing a scale, you need to do maybe like a line and a histogram. So these are some of the critical things. Once you have that as a clear understanding back in your mind, then you know how do you present some specific data. For example, is the age of the children who have been going to school that you're analyzing. If you want to talk about, for instance, the gender of gender, you're analyzing the gender against maybe some economic empowerment level, all those kind of things. You want to have that in mind. So one of the key things you'll be able to also see in those trainings that are upcoming is the issue of how do you make use of a graph in a way that it does not look a chunky graph. And actually, when I was going through all become populated, there's a picture when I was going through somewhere that I got somewhere, and you can be able to see that picture. And when you look at that picture, initially I thought it was a picture initially for me, but later I came to discover that this was a graph. Then I asked myself, what kind of a graph will this really be like? If you saw that pictorial presentation that I'm now presenting right now to you, if somebody saw it, will you be able to see a graph, or will you be able to see a different thing? So ensure when you are doing your analysis, when you are visualizing your data, that which you want people to perceive and get it, you should be in a position to ensure that they are able to get it at the right level. That's what you're just saying. And also, there are a few rules you have to take note of when you're doing graphs. For example, don't put too much information in the graph. Make it always very simple. Be careful about mixing different activities. For example, stick to one group of people, all diseases or services. Don't have many services so much populated in a graph. It becomes very, very unique. And then label your graph is very critical, for instance, and issues of the scales, you need to look at that. And then, of course, as much as possible, I think when you'll be going to each particular tool that you are using to analyze, you will be able to present and let you know. Pie charts, similar things to that. We need to ask ourselves, when do I use a pie chart? How do I present it? What is the advantage of using it and like not using the bar graph? Those are some of the questions and the thoughts we'll be able to discuss when we'll be going through that. Lastly, I want to say that in data analysis and visualizations, Winston Churchill, one of the former prime minister, finalizes by saying that this report by its very length defends itself against the risk of being read. When we analyze our data, when we visualize any kind of information that we want to visualize, let us make it simple, clear, not necessarily being too long, but very simple, specific, precise, to the point, and ensure that the main variables and the main objective of the project that you are addressing is being able to be addressed by that kind of analysis or visualization that you'll be able to make in any kind of work you'll be doing. I think I'll stop there, and I want to give the participants an opportunity just to maybe raise one question or two, and then from there we'll be able to proceed. Thank you so much, but looking forward to seeing you very soon. Now, specifically in terms of the tools that you talked about for data analysis and visualizations like SPSS class, how do you analyze your data using SPSS? Which kind of data is good to analyze in SPSS? Of course, in terms of quantitative, qualitative, what are the gaps in terms of analyzing qualitative data in SPSS? Those are some of the things we need to discuss and look at length when the right time comes. Thank you. Back to Diana.
Thank you very much, Wycliffe, for that great presentation. At this point, we're going to go directly into the Q&A bit of our webinar. There's a lot of questions that are coming in. I will start with Courage. So Courage asks, kindly further unpack the differences between qualitative and quantitative data, and why is it important to have both approaches when measuring results for a particular intervention? In what circumstances is qualitative more preferred to quantitative approaches? So Wycliffe, you can take that up.
Thank you. Let me say that previously we used to have what you call traditional monitoring and evaluation, where people were so much interested about the numbers alone. But it came to a point that we realized that numbers alone cannot tell you the much. We need to know the number, but beyond that number, we want to know how quality were these numbers achieved. What is the story behind getting the numbers? Let me give an example, quantitative data. We're talking about the number of children who have been enrolled for free primary school in Kenya. That is very good when you see great numbers. But beyond that, we want to ask ourselves qualitative indicators. What in those children who have been enrolled for that free primary education, how many are able to access quality education? That is very critical. Then in that, we also want to know what are some of the most significant changes that have happened in the life of the children who are now going to the schools. So those changes is very, very critical. And that's why we are saying that beyond the numbers, it's not enough. We want to look at beyond those numbers, what are the stories behind that? So it's very good to have a mixed approach, the hybrid approach of both quantitative data and the qualitative data. Yeah, so I think in any kind of report, in any kind of data analysis, it's good to pack it up with the qualitative data, because qualitative data will help you to answer the questions which will not be very clear in the numbers. If you did only quantitative data, so you may not be able to explain why those numbers are the way they are. But you also went ahead to story and ask people, why do you think this happened? Then you may be able to understand the story and the reason as to why those numbers are the way they are. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that question, I'll follow up with a question also from Nicholas in regards to qualitative data. But before I read out the question, I'd like to say I will welcome a few participants to ask questions live on the webinar. So kindly, if you do have a question for us, raise your hand. We'll allow you to unmute yourself and ask the question. So I will read Nicholas's question. So are there any ways of visualizing qualitative data?
Thank you. Just quickly on visualizing of qualitative data, first and foremost, the qualitative data, when you visualize it, it may not make a lot of meaning to us, because when we talk about data analysis, what you're interested is to draw conclusions. And when you draw conclusion, it means you must make a meaningful decision out of that. So qualitative data, for example, let me just give that where we are talking about a story where maybe we are explaining why people are not using, let me give an example of people prefer, there's what you call the CLTS. In CLTS, in WASH programs, you know that there are people who do not want to use latrines. They have built the latrines, but they are not using that. So you want to know, why are they not using the latrines? When you know why they're not using the latrines, that is a story which is going to be, actually, we'll always want to know the why. We may not be able to project that and put in a graph or in a bar chart to show you that the why. But you want that because, of course, at some point we have been able to know how many are using the toilets. We know the number. Then why now will help us to pack up that information already. So basically, let me say this, that qualitative data will not be used to visualize, but it helps us to pack up the information that has been visualized so that people can understand this is the meaning behind this visual data which I've been able to see. If my graph tells me this, behind this number, behind these reasons, this is the reason as to why this is happening.
Thank you very much for that. And remember, if you'd like to ask a question, participants, kindly raise your hand and we'll be able to allow you to unmute yourself to ask a question. Right now, I do have a question from Zalmai, who asks what is the difference between margin of error and level confidence in sampling? What is the difference between margin of error and level confidence in sampling?
Okay, thank you so much. When you talk about maybe before that, allow me just to mention something that I was just also reading the questions in the chat. Then I saw some questions. So this was a little bit confusing. Maybe allow me to answer what I had in mind already. There's somebody question called Simon Emmanuel Moga. He was asking a question about qualitative data analysis using Atlas. Yes, we can have an opportunity to discuss that. So if you're interested on that, please feel free, reach out, then I'll be able to help you so that you can learn on how you do that. Yes, now let's go to the question that they're asking about margin of error and confidence level. Is it? Diana, you are here, you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry?
Yes. You can read the question again, please.
Oh, the question. Okay.
Yes.
The question is, what is the difference between margin of error and level confidence in sampling?
Okay, great. When you talk about sampling, first of all, sampling is the method through which we are able to, randomly, or rather using whichever type of sampling method you want to come about when you want to select your specific sample to help in your research, and like using the entire population. Meaning, when I'm sampling, I'm interested in a specific lesser data than the real population data. So when you talk about a margin of error, in most cases, these are some aspects you want to look at. It's actually, for me, I look at the margin of error and the confidence level having a similar meaning. The difference is, when you talk about the confidence level, this is already what has been set in terms of what level of, at what level do I want to measure my data? In terms of what allowance do I have to create to ensure that, the data, the margin error is acceptable. But I think the margin error is more to the project, the data that I'm doing itself. But a confidence level I set in advance. For example, if I say, I am doing a data on health. In health, and maybe I'm using, I want to test a drug A, on the effectiveness of drug A, compared to maybe another study which we are doing about maybe behavior change of some concept out there. So most likely, when I'm doing the drug, effectiveness of the drug, I might want to reduce my margin error, which could be still similar to setting up my confidence level. Because the margin error is what outcome I'll still be able to get out of that, but I have to limit it within the confidence level. Because in most cases, for example, is it at 90, 95, 99, and so on. So the margin error tends to look at more of what kind of research am I doing. If it's very delicate, you have to manage and reduce the risks of that. Yes.
Thank you so much. And I do have a question from Ernest, who says, which technique to use in converting the qualitative data into quantitative data for visualization?
Yes, one of the things I'll have to mention, it is true. What he has asked, it's possible at some level you can change qualitative data. You may have pure qualitative data, but again, you can lessen it by where you break it down to quantitative and qualitative. But in most cases, as I've said, there could be some tools you may want to use, like maybe the Atlas, which already was mentioned, or NVivo, where once I use it, I'll be able to pick that which can be depicted as a quantitative data. And then, of course, whatever will remain as qualitative, which is more to giving meaning to the quantitative data. But allow me to say this, even ChatGPT right now, for those who are using ChatGPT, what you call artificial intelligence now, tools, is another very good tool you can be able to do this. And you can make your preconditions and set what you want to pick in that, which can give you quantitative data for each, as long as all the questions or the variables that you are addressing have this specific concept. Then you are be able to pick your quantitative data, and then from there you remain with what you can classify as qualitative data. But again, my suggestion is such a way that when you get it, the feedback, you are able to get the qualitative report and the quantitative report separately. It becomes easy to analyze your data. Otherwise, if you get your qualitative data alone, you do qualitative data alone, then you want again to get quantitative data out of that, it becomes so complex. So any good study, as you plan for your tools, ensure you have quantitative data. Know how do you collect the quantitative data. Know in advance, set in the tool in such a way that it allows you to collect quantitative data and the qualitative data separately. Of course, in the same tool, but I mean, when you come to analyzing, you can analyze the two separately. And if it's one tool, you can analyze quantitative data first at stage 1, then stage 2, you can also fill up with the qualitative data. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wycliffe. And I think that also answers Stephen's question on how can someone analyze qualitative data. At this point, I'd like to welcome some of our participants to ask questions, starting with Mohammed Hussein, who will be followed by Magwe. Mohammed, if you can hear us.
Maybe as Mohammed comes on board, I just want to say that question of qualitative analysis, that there are many methods on how you analyze qualitative data. For instance, you can use what you call thematic analysis, where you want to analyze the data as per the specific theme. Yeah, so there are very many approaches. I think once you'll be able to get deeper to the training, depending on the kind of tool you're using, then you'll be able to go through that. But there are many methods under that. I think we'll discuss more on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I'll be able to mention, just to add on that here at Humanitarian Global, we actually do have trainings, both on data collection tools and data analysis and visualization. So for data collection tools, there is Kobo Toolbox, ODK, which is Open Data Kit, and among others. For data analysis and visualization, we do have SPSS, and I did mention we actually do have an upcoming class starting very soon on SPSS. So if you're interested in the same, kindly do reach out to us. We have been also able to share the link to register on the chat section, so you can register for that, as well as on data analysis and visualization. We also do have Stata, R programming, Tableau, Power BI, and among Atlas, among others. Okay, so if you're interested in taking up data collection or data analysis and visualization, remember the two usually go hand in hand, and they are quite important in M&E, as you've seen today. Do register with us to undertake these courses. At this point, I do welcome Mohammed with his question. Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Anna. What is the difference between qualitative data and quantitative data?
Thank you, Mohammed, for that question. I believe actually Wycliffe had already answered this question, but you can go over it again.
Just mention it quickly. Basically, even I put it in simple language, when we talk about qualitative data, is that kind of information in most cases when you want to, which cannot be counted, or you cannot measure it and express it in terms of numbers. For instance, I'm saying you want to know, why don't you use latrines? The answer is not going to be 1, 2, 3. It's going to be because of ABCD. That's the qualitative data. Then when I ask you, which grade are you? You say grade 1. Which level are you in university? Maybe first year, second year, third year. It's more numerical, it's more number form. But again, that could be also, under number form, you also need to be very cautious. There's what you call numeric number, which is 1, 2, 3, then real numbers, for example, H. Then there's ordinal. Ordinal is the level. For example, Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, Form 4. That's a level of a range. Or when I say I agree, disagree, some form of like that. All those are ordinal figures. Yeah, I think basically that's it about qualitative data and quantitative data. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Gawe, kindly ask your question. You can unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, seems we are unable to hear him. Crispin
There's
Olo?
Another question on, okay, actually I wanted to mention about Crispin Olo. She had a question, but maybe she can raise it up.
Okay, yes, Crispin Olo.
Thank you so much. I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Yeah, we
we're
can
able
hear
to hear you.
Okay, thank you. There are some questions that I've raised there in the chat box, but I have not heard.
Yes, actually, I can respond immediately. I was on that. Clarify when you measure the results and impact, consider the project life cycle. First of all, in project evaluation, and remember, we don't measure results of I want to believe you talked about outcome, which is results in this case. I want to mean that's what you meant, outcomes and impacts. Am I right?
Yeah, you are right, but I was going with the topic that you said.
Exactly, yes. First of all, it's good to know that under results, I said we have shorter term results, which are outputs. For example, the number of trainings which we are doing. Like now, this training here, if we count it in terms of numbers, then it counts an output result because it's immediate. After the training, we are able to know how many number of participants participated. I can be able to pick it. It's an output. It's immediate short-term result. Then after maybe like 5 months, and I am able to train, let's say 10 participants, and they're able to use SPSS knowledge and apply it. Now those 10 who have applied the SPSS knowledge, I will be able to say that's more of an outcome result. So it's a higher level of the results. Impact is when we see a bigger picture in society. For instance, and this could be applicable, for example, in cases, let's give an example of a HIV pandemic in a country. When you want to reduce that, we'll want to say that's an impact, and it takes a long time. And mostly impacts are measured through what you call the national demographic surveys. For example, if it's in Kenya, we have the national demographic survey, which is done, I think, after 5 years. So through that, you are able to check the impacts. And one of the things I must say is, you can't measure an impact in a project life cycle. You can measure it after a bigger evaluation is conducted at a national level. But for outcome, yes, you can measure the results of outcome through the evaluations. That's what I'd say.
That's brilliant. And then maybe this is the last question that I would like to get a clarification. How can we ensure that the correlation and the partners identified in the data analysis truly represent the accusation and do not coincidental relationship, considering the potential for confounding variables and biases? In other words,
just come up again.
My question is this: how can we ensure that the correlation and partners identified in the data analysis truly represent accusation and not just coincidental relationship, considering the potential for confounding variables and biases? Because in the most cases, we find that after all doing those data analysis, and then we find that if the data is not well represented how it needs to be done, and then the accusation actually will lead to wrong recommendation and conclusion of this data. How can we ensure that this one?
Yeah, very, very clear and a very pertinent question there. Thanks, Crispin. One of the things I usually say, I think for you to manage and handle this issue properly of actually avoiding confounding feedback or other answers to our research, the critical element here is to ensure that first and foremost, you are able to manage and develop your tools efficiently. So for me, I look at it like, how did you develop your tools? Then how do you ensure that you lessen or rather manage the bias when you are doing your data collection? So that, and which kind of methodology are you using in data collection that will give you lesser bias? I think those are some of the key things as an M&D evaluator, you need to really consider. Once you have that in consideration, then it's very easy for you to arrive at good conclusions. But otherwise, if you use long tools, maybe a methodology that is not very precise, then most likely you are going to have those confounding factors happening at the end of the day, and your report will be subject to discussion. That's a fact.
Thank you so much. That is brilliant.
Thank you so much, Wycliffe and Crispin. So in the interest of time, we will be ending there today. However, as you can see, there's so many questions pouring in, and we have shared our link to our community forum. We are always engaging on our community forum. You can always share all these questions on the community forum, and we'll be able to respond to them. Wycliffe is also on the community forum. Maybe you might want him to elaborate a little bit more on data visualization or data collection or anything in regards to monitoring and evaluation. You can always reach out to him on the community forum. We have shared the link. Do join the community forum. Do share the link with your colleagues and friends to also join the community forum. It's quite active. It's quite engaging. Such questions are put out on the community forum, and we are able to discuss them and answer them. With that, we come to the end of today's webinar. I'd like to first and foremost thank Wycliffe for such an excellent presentation, for taking us through today's topic. I want to thank our participants as well, especially those who've been quite engaging with us with all the questions, with all the chats, even those who came live and asked questions. I'd like to also thank the Humanitarian Global team for having facilitated this webinar. We will be sharing the recording as well as the presentation that Wycliffe took us through today on our community forum. So I do encourage you to join the community forum. That is where we do share these webinar recordings as well as the presentations that are shared. With that said, I hope I get to see you next week for our webinar next week. Next week's webinar excuse me, will be on WASH. So it will be a WASH webinar. So I hope I do get to see you. I hope we do get to engage again next week. Until then, I wish you all the best and have a good rest of your day. Goodbye.
My name is Adam Mohammed. I am a humanitarian person and a farmer at the same time. I'm also a Nigerian. My journey as a humanitarian started sometimes around 2016 in the NYSC camp. You know, when you finish your degree program, you need to go for a year training. So in Nigeria, we call it NYSC, National Youth Service Corps. So while at the camp, I have this staff of CUSO International. CUSO International actually is a Canadian humanitarian organization that is working towards ensuring no poverty and no equality among the community in all. So they approached the serving corps members at the camp, telling them to come and volunteer with the organization in providing services in certain communities that they will be posted to. At first, I wasn't interested because I am a farmer. Then I realized that there are several areas where I can render my service to. I can also render my service to youths, encouraging them to have a sustainable means of livelihood in agriculture. There and then, I key in, I applied, I became a volunteer. So after volunteering with CUSO International, I then had the interest of working as a humanitarian person. I worked with CUSO International for a year, and thereafter, I moved for my second degree studies, Masters in Agricultural Economics at Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. So because of the distance of the place I was rendering the humanitarian service and the place I'm studying, I had to then resign from that particular role. Thereafter, while I was working, I was studying with at Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. Then I also had the opportunity to also volunteer with Action Against Hunger in Borno State. Because of the insurgency the people in the IDP camp needed humanitarian service, then I said to myself, I would volunteer to provide that service. After working with Action Against Hunger, after I worked as a farm manager with Agro News Nigeria, and then here I am today working with FX Commodities Exchange, impacting life and providing humanitarian services to the humanity. While volunteering with CUSO International and Action Against Hunger, Feed the Future and all that on other short projects, I then developed that inherent, will I say, likeness of providing humanitarian services to the entire humanity. Then one day I was sitting on my laptop checking through online. Then I decided, I said, no, I need to look at some kind of humanitarian courses that I would attend so I can enhance my skills and my ability to deliver more in the humanitarian sector. So I went online and then I was searching there, and then I came across Humanitarian Global, and then immediately I signed up. I checked the programs that they have. I looked at one particular program that attracted my attention, which is Monitoring, Evaluation, Accountability and Learning, MEAL in short. So I then applied for MEAL program. So generally for MEAL program, I will tell you that it has been superb. Honestly, it has been very, very superb. If there is any word that's higher than that, I will use that. Then for what I have learned, wow, what I have learned actually is too enormous. It's not something I can actually share with you today or the whole of my life. But the things I can then remember that I can share with you is that for MEAL, in short, is part of our lives. In everything you do, you have to monitor, you have to evaluate, you have to account, and you have to learn in everything that you do. If you don't learn, like the famous saying, they say, the day you stop learning, that is the day you start dying. So actually, MEAL program entails everything that one needs in life. So I have learned a lot. Part of the learning from the program has assisted me in my job today as a humanitarian person in everything that we do. From the inception of any project, I get involved and then I apply all the learnings that I have there to assist in the development of the basis of the project, how to monitor it, how to evaluate the project, how to get the indicators that will be used to evaluate the project, and at the end of the day to term it as a success or a failure, and also learn from it and how to also account for that particular project. So the learning for MEAL for me is enormous and it's not something that I can share within a short period of time, but I will tell you I have learned a lot. I would actually tell you, Humanitarian Global, first of all, have all the skills that it takes for you to enhance your career as a humanitarian, and also they have the most of the best platform for studying that I have seen, because it's more engaging, it's very interacting, and then you get to interact with your peers, share ideas with your peers that are coming from different countries. So you share idea, and then it's more interactive, and then you work on a case study that are very much live case studies that are intriguing, that makes you to think and bring out the some of the suggestive solutions that you may have for certain issues that the communities are being affected of. I think I can remember of one of the virtual case study that should be a case study on Gamba community. So my learning experience with Humanitarian Global have been very good because it's engaging, it's interactive, and then you share idea with your peers that are from different countries. So it gives you that connection, that linkage, and also the expertise in Humanitarian Global, I must say, are very much grounded. So they tend to take you to the detail, and even if you are a starter, you don't have much experience, you need to, you will be trained by the granular of Humanitarian, and then you get to understand all the terms, all the logics, and everything that is used in humanitarian work to say. When you want to study with Humanitarian Global, one thing you have to have in mind is that Humanitarian Global will give you all it takes for you to study, because they have the flexible studies schedule. Even if you are working, you're being engaged. They also have your peers that you can interact with, and they also have some kind of tech platform that will give you the assistance that you may need at any point in time while studying with Humanitarian Global.
In line with the United Nations 2015 Sustainable Development Goals, Humanitarian Global is an organization that aims to help humanitarian and development practitioners come closer to attaining the SDGs. As an organization, we are proud to be at the forefront of offering excellent training to humanitarian practitioners across the globe. Since its inception, Humanitarian Global has been able to train over 10,000 participants from more than 30 countries, and fortunately, the number keeps getting bigger.
Consultant and also a trainer for Humanitarian Global, and my areas of competencies are diverse, basically in WASH and also in project management and monitoring and evaluation. I've had lengthy years of consultancy work with humanitarian organizations in the area of WASH projects, and that's basically what describes me.
We support the career advancement of humanitarians and development practitioners through our online courses, on-site and virtual workshops, capacity development, and team building. Humanitarian Global partners with organizations to build capacity and provide consultancy services to achieve their development goals in consultancy, research, and team building. Humanitarian Global works with various stakeholders on the ground to identify humanitarian and development problems and offer solutions. We do this through advocacy, promoting humanitarian work, sharing valuable resources such as blogs, and providing networking opportunities such as community forums. These are the areas or programs that we focus on: monitoring, evaluation, accountability and learning, water, sanitation and hygiene, disaster risk reduction and management, food security and nutrition and emergencies, procurement and supply chain management, human nutrition and dietetics, maternal, infant and young child nutrition. Meet Babu Karalkoral, one of our previous participants. He undertook a water sanitation and hygiene course with us, and here is what he had to say regarding his experience with us.
Babu Karkor. I actually come from West Africa, the Gambia. I work for our national water and electricity company called NAWEC. I actually came across Humanitarian Global in the internet, and I was really interested when I found they could do some training on water sanitation and hygiene. Actually, I was pleasantly surprised because when I came here, the training material, the lecture guide and everything was extremely beyond my expectation. Although it was very intensive and very, very tough. So every day I have to do a homework, which was really not easy. My expectations were met beyond imagination. The training was really detailed. The material and content were really wonderful, and I think everything was beyond my expectation. I've been given material, I've been given guidelines, and even this institution is trying to link me with people internationally who are interested in and doing what I am interested in doing also.
All our training programs are developed by experienced facilitators who have extensive field experience, as well as proven ability to coach, mentor, and support personnel in working environments. In addition to that, our learners can study at their own pace and time regardless of their schedule, since our courses are hosted on an e-learning platform that is accessible online. Through this platform, participants are able to interact with our skilled facilitators as well as other fellow participants. Meet one of our top WASH facilitators as he breaks down how we create our programs.
Definitely, I think Humanitarian Global is an institution that applies global standards in terms of humanitarian training, and that is the reason why participants coming from different countries can actually be able to feel very, very comfortable to be able to come into Humanitarian Global, find global standards, find global knowledge, find global skills, and global tools and techniques to be able to help them apply their profession in diverse organizations. So I think the choice of Humanitarian Global is surely the best bet they can have for humanitarian training.